Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Jamf After Dark podcast, a podcast to introduce you to the people at Jamf, learn about what we're up to when it comes to managing and securing Apple devices, along with what is happening in the IT landscape. I'm your co-host, Kat Garbis, joined by my wonderful co-host, Sean Rabbitt.
Howdy, Internet. How are you doing today? And hello to all 7 of our listeners out there. Although, Kat, I have to stop for a second on the 7 listeners. Did you know there's people who actually think that we're actually serious, that there's only 7 listeners?
Yeah, I do. I get that a lot. We do have several more than 7
There's
listeners.
more than 7 listeners. But
There's more than 7. We're sorry to break those 7 listeners' hearts.
I know. But I want you, one of the 7 listeners, to feel special, to think that you are one of just only 7 people in the world that know about this podcast and the secrets within. So I'm going to stick with there's only 7 listeners. We need to make stickers for JNUC.
I'm fine with that. I'm sure we could find some budget or, fund it ourselves. I think it's worth it.
I think we can do it there. Kat, I also have to tell you something crazy. So since I'm in beautiful northern Nevada, that's really close to California, and it was snowing here in California last night. It actually shut down the highway going in because there was so much snow. And I wake up this morning, and for those of you in non-freedom units, my weather station said it was 1 degree outside. It's kind of crazy. This weather is nuts.
Speaking of weather, I'm in Chicago and we have an excessive heat warning. So that's also very interesting and sounds like we should have flipped weather. I would take the snow right now personally, but that's just me.
Let's combine them together, and you know what that means? We should probably go mobile.
We
And
should go mobile.
we should go mobile. And, hey, what? There's a couple of people here that can talk about mobile solutions with Jamf today. Wow, that was a terrible setup, wasn't it, folks?
We did it.
Anyway, I got there in the end. That's all that really matters. Let's welcome our guests, Mr. Tim Knox and Mr. Jonathan Yuresko, to talk to us today about what Jamf is doing in the mobile space. Hello.
Well, hello.
Hi, Tim. How are you? It's been like, I don't know, hot minute since we've chatted.
Things are great. Couldn't be better. Things are all mobile and happy.
What do you do here at Jamf, Tim?
I am the senior consulting engineer at Jamf that is focused on all of our industry solutions, which started with healthcare and then grew into retail, manufacturing, hospitality. But really, all it means is iOS devices. If you have an iPad or an iPhone and you want to do something interesting or weird with it, then I get brought in to consult. And oftentimes that means I ask for help with
You're
the
a
other
consulting
person that's here.
engineer. I'm a consulting engineer. Rock on, consulting engineers. Jonathan Yuresko, what the heck do you do here?
Well, if you're a consulting engineer and I'm a consulting engineer and Tim's a consulting engineer, we're all consulting engineers.
Rock on, engineers.
Amen. So I'm a senior consulting engineer at Jamf as well. And my particular kind of part of the consulting engineers deals with things that are not necessarily just Jamf, where we'll come in when an organization, whether they're a new organization to Jamf, looking at Jamf as a prospect, hey, we have this system. How can we make the two talk with each other? Or how can we make our end users' lives a little bit easier? Or how can we help transition into Jamf? We come up and make those tools, have those conversations with any one of those organizations, and end up coming up with some pretty cool solutions. I say to some customers when Tim and I are on the call together, Tim's kind of like the dreamer, and I'm the one that gets yelled at when it doesn't work.
So you're the
order of operation.
You're the executioner. So yeah, Tim will dream it up, and you're putting the recipe to the test. And if you're like, hey, we need like more flour and eggs in this technical recipe, that's where you come in.
And if I burn it Tim still looks good.
It's great.
I also want to clarify, I'm not a consulting engineer. Just wanted to clarify that for listeners. The rest of them are. I just work here.
These
You are
7
to me,
engineers.
Kat.
Yeah, don't let anybody fool you. Kat is the most senior of engineers for this out here. We've deemed it as so, right?
It's a lie, but we'll just go with it for today's recording. So let's start digging in the weeds a little bit. Who are the target end users for some of these mobile options and shared devices? Can you give any examples if we wanted to inspire any of our 7 loyal listeners today? Tim, how about you?
Yeah, it's basically anybody who has an iPhone or an iPad, really. Our target market for folks who want to use these devices in that way are people who work in the airline industry. We're talking about people who work at the gate, or the people who work under the wing, or the people who work above the wing, or anybody in a retail location that's carrying those iPads around who are trying to take your money when you're checking out. Or anybody in hospitality that's maybe turning a room or trying to check you in at the concierge desk. They're nurses, doctors. There are so many ways that we can use these devices. They are incredibly powerful and really mobile. And when managed right, they can speed things along really well.
I want to follow up on that a little bit though, Tim, because a lot of the roles you described, like let's run with some of this. Maybe I'm a flight attendant, or I'm at the gate. I'm a retail employee looking to take your money, as you stated, or I'm flipping a room and I'm housekeeping. None of these people are technically technical people. They are not IT roles. So how are we making it work where it's easy enough for them to feel confident in doing somewhat technical like things with these iOS devices and mobile devices, but also not having to bog down IT? I feel like that's something to really think about, no?
Yeah, a lot of those roles were done for a very long time with a clipboard and a piece of paper and a pen. And then a bunch of app developers came across the way to make that piece of tool, the technology of a paperboard, a clipboard, and a piece of paper and a pen, put it in a digital space so that anybody can use this and they can pick it up in a very similar kind of way. It's a very familiar feeling to hold a piece of glass like that and to write on it or use it in that way. Uh, these app developers, the folks who work with Jamf and work with Apple to make these tools, make it in a really innovative and intuitive is the word I'm looking for, way for folks to be able to use it just like any other tool. So focus them in on just doing that one thing. Tools for a purpose.
Jonathan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the way that Apple has kind of put out these devices in mobility or for mobility, they kind of remove the wall of a Mac screen from the end user interactions, where you're not just staring at a screen, you're talking to the person in retail. You're not just staring at a screen, whether you're a pilot or whatever, you're also dealing with the entire machinery that surrounds you. Similar with a nurse, you don't want a nurse sitting at a computer. Like when they come in to take your credit card and insurance information, that's one thing. But if a nurse or doctor is staring at a screen and not you, you're not going to have the best experience in that organization. So our kind of roles come into play where we're not always talking with IT. Yes, we have to talk with IT because they have the limitations or the regulations or the restrictions or the tech stack. We're talking with those end users, students as well. Libraries have checkout systems where they check out devices. We focus on the end user experience and then make it, if we make it easy for them, less IT tickets, less headache for IT, so on and so forth.
And just to be pedantically clear about this too, so we've got mobile solutions, and Tim, you're talking about like a pilot getting an iPad. And then we're talking about retail people. And I have a lovely certificate up on my wall here of 10 years of working at Apple Retail. So I'm amazed that I survived. But we didn't get individual devices for ourselves. Talk a little bit about what this shared concept is.
Yeah, there's a few ways to talk about shared device. It is a surprisingly complicated subject. There is the Apple way of sharing it, which is using their technology called Shared iPad for Business. Works great on an iPad, not as good on an iPhone because it doesn't work on an iPhone. But Shared iPad for Business allows you to log in with managed Apple IDs, meaning you got to federate your IDP into MAIDs to log in on a device level on the device to get access to your apps behind a username and a password. But there are other ways that we could do this. If you don't need authentication, you can use tools that could allow you to swap a user or swap a role. We have an app that's been around forever called Jamf Setup that we've been using for a long, long time that does exactly that. We've added some stuff to it in the intervening years, but at its core, it's taking a device and saying, well, right now I'm being used for a point of sale device, but I'm going to hand it to somebody who doesn't do that job. And now it's going to look like something different. It totally changes the context of the device.
So tell us a little bit more about what we're doing in this space then, since we have setup and reset, and people are probably a little bit familiar with that idea that they can pick the role. But we've expanded on that a little bit too. And I know, Jonathan, you've been doing some crazy behind the scenes stuff to really expand upon that too. What's Jamf doing different now with the mobile shared space?
Yeah, a lot of it comes into play when you have to scope certain things to those users that Tim talked about. Where, say, a nurse picks a nurse role in Jamf setup, they want to only make sure that nurse related apps get put down. If it's a student, you want to make sure that the student that logs into the device or signs into the device via either their Apple ID or maybe their Okta account or Microsoft account gets synced back to Jamf. Jamf then knows what grade they're in, what classes they're in, and then pushes down those certain things to the device. And there's a lot of different ways to get that information. It all kind of comes back to some sort of device assignment where this device at this moment is belonging to either a role, a person, a mixture of the two, whatever the case may be. And in every use case, it's a little bit different. But how do we get that username in there? And then how do we get the apps on the device to start interacting with whoever signed into that device? I would say we've gone through many, many iterations of it. So we've had the Jamf Setup app, which is a app you download from the App Store or push out through VPP. You select a role, you're golden. We then started building out this concept where you could sign in with your Microsoft account. Through Jamf Setup, and then that would attach your username to the Jamf record. That device is now yours. There were some caveats there. There are some reliances. I mentioned Microsoft. Why didn't I say Okta? May not exist for all IDPs. So there are certain things and limitations that we encounter through many different organizations that kind of prohibit certain things from happening based on their previous choices or their previous kind of tech stack.
So I want to build on some of this a little bit because I feel like I'm the perfect person to test things out because I love to try to break things. So let's pretend I'm a student, right? There's maybe a shared device, but I pick the teacher option, or I'm in retail and I'm a sales associate, but I choose the manager option. What do we do to prevent someone like me, right, trying to maybe get into a role I'm not supposed to, or I'm a nurse and I pick physician? I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? I want to know, like, what barricades we put around to keep it secure, for the end user to not only choose the right role and get the right things, but maybe I'm a bad actor, maybe I just want to pick bad things and wrong things on purpose.
Yeah, I'd say the first thing we do is not give you the device.
Fair.
And then beyond that, we try to give the device and the options that would eliminate any of those particular things ahead of time. So, on top of device assignment, there's also scoping mechanisms inside of all of our Jamf products that say if you are giving this device to an end user in this building or in this retail store, only give them certain options. We can put in potentially a login that has a password in it that says, you, Kat, are not a manager. So once you log in, you're not going to see manager as an option. So that goes back to an assignment by your user. And then we can grant via the cool technology that Apple's put out for managed Apple IDs, or not managed Apple IDs, managed app configs. Everything's managed. That allows only certain things to be then pushed down to the device. I may have stepped over you, Tim, but I'll pass it over.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, throwing a login screen in front of anybody, any choice is going to help reduce bad actors. Asking an IDP to prove you are who you say you are, and then tie the user's role to that login and use that role for scoping is the most sure way to guarantee that you're only going to get the stuff you're able to see because we only allow you to see the stuff that you're allowed to see. But that's the quickest way.
I appreciate it. And I'm not an unethical person. I also used to be part of a managed service provider. So we would always think, worst case scenario, what's the risk assessment, right? We want to risk manage this. Like from an IT perspective, this sounds great, but what's going to keep us up at night if we don't close any potential security gaps in that? So, our 7 listeners, they may be like, hey, this mobile stuff sounds cool. How secure it is it going to create more gaps in security than help them despite streamlining things? So I'm glad you all are entertaining this thread in my mind and just kind of running with it.
And I'm the sort of person who will find any iPad in any airport anywhere and make sure just see if I can get into it. Is this thing
Yeah.
actually in single app mode, or is it
We try to break things.
Let's see what we can do. Yeah.
So you've been to Minneapolis and you've been in that one place that has all the iPads. That was fun. Just going over there and going like, there's no management on this. This is a little strange.
Tim and I have traveled together. We've both
Yep.
attempted to break things at airports. So we just always check
For ethical purposes.
For ethical purposes
only. Yes.
White hat.
Speaking of safety, one of the things that Apple introduced as part of the spec was this concept of return to service, but then we also have an app called Return to Service. Would one of the two of you like to discuss what the heck Return to Service is, what it does, and what we're doing with this weird app that we've got?
Sure. Yeah, I can grab that one. Return to Service is a new endpoint that Apple introduced 2 years ago at WWDC. It allows an MDM to send a command to a device to erase all content and sendings, but it retains the language, the region, and the Wi-Fi in most cases. So you could potentially send an erase all content. Hang on. You could potentially send a return to service command to a target device. It would erase everything on the device and get it completely back up to the welcome screen without any user intervention at all. Totally wipes it, totally sets it back up again. Nobody needs to touch it. Really useful for end of shift things where you just need to destroy all the data, and when they come in the next morning, it's ready to roll. Oh, and education too. My goodness, this will be useful in education.
Speaking of return to service too, Jonathan, one of the things that you spoke about earlier was Microsoft and how that was tied into Jamf setup and reset when you wanted to log in. That's been like a real a problem of requiring just Microsoft for that up to this point, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Microsoft and all the other apps that have to respect Microsoft. So if you're trying to do some sort of way to have your SSO token cached and have it populate amongst all your apps on a device once you've signed in, Jamf Reset will revoke that token from only apps that respect that particular mechanism. And if you need to get all of the devices, all of your apps removed from whatever login you just signed into, because if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you're literally anyone, you don't want any information passed from your time using the device to the next. If your apps don't utilize that particular logout mechanism that Microsoft has, return to service is kind of the next best thing, where it will auto bring you right back to the ability for you to sign in clean, fresh. All your apps will start putting down automatically. It'll automatically enroll. You'll get right to that home screen, super clean in like not even a couple minutes.
Nice. Very nice. Let's switch gears a little tiny bit here. I haven't heard too much of this Assigner app because I haven't been playing with it. But who wants to talk about what an Assigner app is? Oh, Mr. Timms. There you go.
I'm very excited about the Assigner app. I think it really shows what is possible within the consulting engineering group. And they really do some cool stuff. Assigner takes the ideas that we started with setup many years ago, 2019, I think, to be exact, and it expands it. Jamf setup allows you to choose one extension attribute and populate it with a value, the end. That's what it allows you to do. Assigner allows you to do two of them, which seems small, but the idea of being able to have two values that you can trigger smart group automation from is very slick. But it gets better than that because it also allows you to do a department, and it also allows you to do a building, and it also allows you to log in. It doesn't tie a user like role to the device, but it does prevent people like me and Kat from just picking up a device, making a choice on it, and then having that device just become that thing. You have to have some known identity within the organization in order for you to even get to the choice. Then you can pick the two EAs, could be a store and a job, and then it could be the department within that store, and then it could be the building that they are physically in, and then all of the triggers of the smart groups can happen from there. But then there's one thing that I think is the best part of it, which is my favorite part, and I show it all the time, and I love it because I think it's so cool. You can enter a design mode in the app itself to change all of those settings. You can change all the little icons. You can change the whole branding, the colors, the words on the buttons, and then hit a button to export that app config. And you can just upload that to Jamf, and then your whole fleet looks like the thing you have in your hand. So no more guessing and writing XML. Just make it look the way you want it to look, and then export the app config. It's pretty cool.
And it's magic. I mean, we've been working on this type of tool for some time in so many different iterations and versions and drop downs and colors and branding and all these different things. Where the team wasn't originally able to make Swift apps. That's kind of a big deal. Where how else are you going to get an interface onto the device? The only real options are a Swift app or web browser. And web browser requires someone to host the thing. We can't have every organization have their version of Assigner hosted in Jamf Pro and push that out to every customer that has Jamf Pro. That's not a great time. We can't do similar things that we can on like Macs. We can't push down, not that you should. We can't push down plain text passwords down to an iPad. Shouldn't do that on a Mac either. So how do we do that? We now have the ability to do these types of apps to make these really cool things, and it's kind of cool to see how it all just can happen for the end user magically without seeing any passwords or have IT have to touch every single device.
So let's walk through this. Education has always been really at the heart of Jamf, and I'm curious, how can a signer be used in an education environment?
The education team has a lot of really excellent tools already to do a lot of this work. The way potentially, I mean, I'm really curious to see what Jonathan has to say about this as well, but I'm just going to walk through one of the potential options. Grab a device that is maybe used for a substitute teacher, or a device has been broken, or you need to find something new and you just need to get a device in the hands of a kid, or maybe a librarian has them. You can open this app. You can select the grade. You'll be able to select the class they're in. You'd be able to select like maybe what purpose it could be used for. And then it could just narrow that device down to just that one thing so that the kid is going to be focused on what they're supposed to be focused on and nothing else. That would be one way I could see this being used.
Another way comes to mind of the times when a school system is doing device refreshes. And say you are deploying 60,000 iPads. How do we get that device into the proper student hand? How do we get it properly assigned to that student? How do we push all these things and get them provisioned? I don't know about you, but if you turn on and start enrolling 60,000 iPads on one access point inside of your gym, have all of those apps start flowing down at once, you're probably not going to have the greatest time. So a lot of schools, what they'll do, a lot of organizations, they'll have a staging environment. Well, they'll get the devices up to a certain point where they'll get them enrolled. They'll get some core apps on there, and then they'll get them to a point where either maybe we can scan an asset tag into Jamf and have it populate. That requires a computer station and then someone that has access to do this type of scanning, or maybe we can offload that task to the device and the user itself. And that's where this assigner can come into play, where if every device is in the exact same state, all 60,000 of them, how fast, all it takes is a simple login or a select choice of a certain grade or whatnot, and those devices are ready for the students. There's no longer that delay. You don't have to do a crazy tiered rollout because of your network capacity. All you're doing is choosing either an extension attribute, a department, building, grade, whatever the case is, and then hit go. There's no wait time.
And it sounded like there's a way for Tim and I to log in, so we're not choosing the wrong thing.
You can do that ahead of time. You can provision based on network segment if you have those allocated inside of Jamf. There's a whole slew of mechanisms, and we love talking about those things, especially on the consulting engineering team, because that's when you get down to the nitty gritty and to say, well, we had this special use case. Okay, well, your special use case has what can we pull off of to make this easier for your end users? Because schools don't have 10 IT people per building. They usually have 10 IT people for the entire school organization, let alone just the boots on the ground. So you could train your teachers to do it, add problems and headache, or have your students do it, because chances are the students can do it just as easy and just as successful.
It sounds an awful lot like when the consulting engineers come in, they're solving a specific problem for an organization too, and there's a lot of custom work. What type of custom work if you can make it as generic as possible for the people who have actually used it, since we don't want to mention any customer names without permission today. But what have you actually guys done that is some custom work out there that's in the field being used today?
Mostly what I do is I bring in Jonathan and I have him solve all my problems for me. But the the custom work
He
that,
is a
that I
genius too,
personally
you know.
agreed. The stuff that I think is really neat that we've done, that I've been involved with directly, is mostly around the healthcare space. The work that we've done that's very customized, in that area, we've had a long history at Jamf of working in the healthcare organizations. And so some of the orgs have very built out and complicated uh, rollouts of these devices. They have devices that are literally life-saving devices that have a lot of dependencies that are being shared amongst their staff, and they require them to be logged in, and they require very timely logins and logouts, so that when you log out for your hour lunch break, that phone number that is being used for that nurse on call is being transferred to another phone that's being used on call. And that's through the apps on the device, but that device has to be aware of logins and logouts. And that's a really interesting and complicated problem to try to solve, but we have solved it. And seeing that in action in a hospital is really cool and very rewarding.
I'd say anything that I like doing, or I guess would be proud of, are the ones that are the really unique ones. Like we've talked about this entire time about an end user logging into something or choosing options or whatever. How do you assign an iPad to a preschooler? Those are really fun problems to solve. What can we do? How can we identify someone that is unable to press a button? Or how do we accomplish a task in mobility that someone doesn't have to be tech savvy? um, those types of scenarios are cool. For the sake of the preschool kindergarten one, we said, well, is there any kind of identification that the student has that's a physical one? Do they have a student ID? Do they have anything that has numbers, a barcode, QR code? Oh yeah, sure, we have something. They each have a QR code on their student IDs, and they're required to have their student IDs. Let's use that as their identification. There is no human error there when you're scanning a barcode or QR code. Back when the COVID was first hitting, we needed a way to quickly send out a video conferencing link to the patient in a room without having a doctor or nurse come into it. How do we start that meeting? How do we refresh that meeting? The end user is the patient, and they're probably not going to be able to quickly learn how to use an iPad or quickly use how to use a video conferencing platform. If we can make it one button or less, that's where we come in.
These questions kind of go hand in hand, but you kind of touched on it a little bit, Jonathan. What kind of problems are we solving? And how are we helping our customers in solving some of these problems?
Oof. That's can I say any and all? I mean, we have anywhere from, I guess, in the mobility space, it's really a dream state. We start there, where are we trying to solve an end user problem? Are we trying to solve an IT problem? Are we trying to solve an HR problem? Whatever the case may be, it starts kind of with some sort of goal. And then through that, we will communicate with all parties needed, whether it's HR, InfoSec, security, IT, purchasing, whatever may be, procurement, any of the above. We may pull in any of our partners too to help get this solved. If Jamf's not necessarily someone that does secure drive drilling, if we need to completely securely get rid of a drive, we have partners that do that. Our team is really good at bringing those parties to the table and having those conversations. But if we're talking about Jamf in general, what kind of things that we're looking to solve, I mean, it's anywhere from, hey, my organization is all Windows. We have someone that's high up that wants to use a Mac. How do we learn Mac? How do we start managing Macs? We come in, we show them how it's not always um, a simple, here's a list of on your right side of the Windows requirements. We need to meet every single one of those on the Apple side. We've had that conversation ever since Apple started implementing kind of Mac choice. And then everywhere in between. I mean, we just did the enormous airline was not an Apple device environment. How do we transition all those tens of thousands of not Apple devices into Apple devices? How do we do it seamlessly? How do we make it so it has little impact on mid-flight or on the ground as possible?
Tim, anything to add as far as projects that we are proud of or problems that we're just solving to just really help our customers or a future customer out? And Yuresko, I think you definitely helped kind of paint that starter vision, but I really want to inspire anyone listening that may not realize we can help with something right now.
The the thing I find most interesting about this job is that folks will come to us because they see us as an expert in the Apple ecosystem, which could mean anything. One of the conversations I had just a couple of months ago was with a customer who's on an oil rig, and they have devices that are completely sealed in a case. They can't have anything plug into it because that could create a spark, which could be catastrophic. And so, how do you swap a device if it is screwed into a case that the users can't have access to and they're out on an oil rig with no IT there? So, how do you change the user in that case? How do you make that happen? That's such a, like, well, what a good question. Let's see if we can figure it out. And we ended up using the Jamf Mobile Assist app, which we talked about Gen Up last year, which allows you to scan a QR code on a device, like a target device from a control device. So you could take the control device and scan the QR code on the target device to change what that device is being used for without having to get physical access to the device. So you could wipe it if somebody walked away and they had a passcode on it. So because people would leave these rigs pretty frequently to go to other jobs, and they'd have that device locked and they would just be there until they piled up and have to mail them home. This solved that problem. So the kinds of things that we solve could be like literally anything. Like, just bring it to us. We'll figure something out, or we'll find a partner that can.
And we
Uh,
want to, right? So
Mhm.
we're not going to just give you a boilerplate MDM product. We're not going to say, here's what we got, go
Yeah,
for it.
on the
We're
spec.
going to we've implemented so many in-house IDPs and made them work with various different products.
I'm
We've
sorry.
Yeah, it is mostly Sean's problem. Well, not Sean's problem. Sean brings
False.
us the problem.
Yeah, yeah, faults more than anything else. Yeah.
And we actively look out these unique workflows, and then we'll either put them into product, make them an integration, hand it off to a partner. And we want to be the partner in those particular scenarios where we want to help drive your ease of being in the technology space as a customer.
I think that's awesome. And I think, the moral of the story is if you have something that's taking much longer than you think it should, or you're mailing things off to the example that Tim gave earlier, or you're wondering there's just got to be a better way. I think that's really that signal to give us a call to connect you with the team. And Tim, I love the example you gave about the oil rig because I felt my brain physically start to hurt trying to think about how to strategically swap a device out that's in a case in the middle of nowhere with no IT. So, love that example.
I actually have two questions based on this too. So, what type of organization, like how many devices do you guys normally think that people should reach out about and see if we can do some custom work? And second, how do people actually reach out and get in touch with y'all to start this off?
Hmm. Um, well, I don't really care how many devices you're using because I like interesting problems. I have helped. Mostly, we're an internal resource. The sales engineers have sales groups. They contact people and they bring them problems, and then we get brought in when it goes beyond the general MDM part of things or security that can just be done right out of the box. Sometimes I help organizations that are 35 devices, and we help get them set up with a custom workflow if needed, because generally those customers who are going to be that innovative are working in fields that will probably grow. And if they are innovative and they are successful with these devices, they'll be able to do things more quickly and less expensively, and the companies will be able to grow. And that means the seat count grows and everybody's happy. Uh, but we've also worked with some pretty sizable companies together. Both Jonathan and I, working together, have handled some very, very, very large ones.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up your phone number and how to reach out to you, Tim, but you don't seem to have it.
Yeah.
But if you don't have Tim's number directly, I'd say any kind of networking event where there's a Jamf person there, JNUC is a great way to have these conversations, spitball ideas. Jamf user groups, if you're in one of those places that have them. There's some Zoom ones if you don't live in proximity to one. Tim and
Mac
I
admin.
both are in Mac admin Slack,
Yeah.
right? Exactly what. See, sometimes we're on the same wavelength. Most of the time we're not, though. Or through your customer success rep, if you have one, just normal, any kind of way to reach out is probably the best way. And do it earlier than later. So if you have a dream state you want your end users to walk through, earlier than later is better. And we'll probably ask some redundant questions, and that's fine. We also supply the tools for you to do it yourself. So you can check our API documentation to do a lot of the things that we discussed if you want to build it in your own house. If you're new to building code, writing apps, all that jazz, we have a lot of great resources in previous JNUCs and JNUCs to come about learning how to use the API and how to do those types of things. So we want to train and teach a person to fish as opposed to just giving you a tool and saying, good luck.
I have 2 sessions at this upcoming JNUC that are all around custom apps.
So if you haven't registered for JNUC, this is your reminder to register for JNUC and put on your cowboy boots and come talk to all of us in Nashville. And if for any reason you are unable, I would say if you don't have a Jamf contact, info@jamf.com is also a pretty solid way. And you could just say you listen to the podcast and we'll get you Tim's direct number.
Yep. And
Yeah.
also, I'm still waiting on someone in Nashville to get me a source for the Rhinestone Cowboy outfit, too. So, again, info@jamf.com. Email that and say, Sean's Rhinestone Cowboy outfit. You know, that'll really confuse some people, and hopefully it'll start a fun conversation at JNUC, too.
I think maybe before we let you all go, we've got I have a few random thoughts because we're talking about how to get a hold of you all. But before you go, we've talked a lot about mobile, and that usually goes to iPad, iOS. What about we're getting crazy here? What about Apple TVs? What about Apple Vision Pros? Do we touch that? Is that something we can help with if someone is using those?
Yes, in both cases. The Apple TVs, we have many years of history managing them. We have them in lots of healthcare organizations being watched by lots of patients all over the place. We've used them for signage. We've used them for store displays. Apple TVs are everywhere. And it's neat because you probably don't even know they are Apple TVs. The big trick to know if they are Apple TVs or not is whether or not you're seeing a blue screen telling you that there's an update needed, or if you're actually seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. That's
Ooh,
between an Apple
shots
TV.
fired.
The Vision Pros, I think, are fascinating. I think that because they're being run on the same or similar OS as iOS or iPad OS, there are some custom apps that should be able to be run on the Vision Pro. And I think that means we can get interesting stuff out of them. And in fact, the new enterprise API endpoints, which I think are really, really cool, and I think are going to be really fascinating about what can happen with them. The ability to have a managed device using a managed app through the custom app store, being able to utilize special enterprise endpoints is going to open up tons of doors for Apple Vision Pro. And I'm pretty excited about where that might lead.
Jonathan, you not wearing your Apple Vision Pro right this second. Anything exciting and interesting that you can think of for great new ways to use an Apple Vision Pro? Or do we need to get you one? We can start a GoFundMe. It's fine.
Yeah. If you want to do that, that'd be great. I know Tim just has a stash of them. I think the coolest thing that I've seen being used is anything that is a real space that you're going to have humans walk through, but have it being shown without building that thing. So thinking of a brand new building, retail space or school or any kind of building, being able to just hand a device to somebody, put this on and be transported into that environment that will be real as opposed to just complete fantasy is pretty neat in terms of building stuff and for Jamf Apple Vision Pro, bring it on.
Nice.
I got asked a question recently about the Vision Pro that I'd never considered before, and I think it's really interesting, which is, what do you think Jamf could do with a Vision Pro as far as the interface goes? Like, what sort of information would be useful for a Jamf admin to see on their Vision Pro, and how they might be able to visualize their own deployments through AVP? I think that's a really, really interesting question, one that I've been thinking about since I got asked.
I'm looking forward to us reproducing that scene from Jurassic Park where you just got the Vision Pro on. It's like, I know this system. It's Jamf Pro. And you know, just waving computers left and right. It'll be great. It'll be great. Thank you for joining us here for this exciting world of mobile devices, Tim and Jonathan. I appreciate you greatly taking the time.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you both for being here today. If anyone's interested in having this wonderful group of just brilliant minds try to help you with anything mobile related, reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. If you'd like any of us to test your technology as well, let us know. And also, Tim and I were picking on ourselves, but I want to point out, so Jonathan and I, we were onboarded together at Jamf. We were in the same group when we actually took down our internal page during our onboarding by uploading too many things to it for a knowledge base. So I just want to throw that Jonathan can also break/test things too.
We did take down our vendor of our internal wiki.
Yep, we did do that. We uploaded too many things, and it went down not just for our group but company wide, and we're still here. So I just wanted to share that story. 8 years later, Jonathan and I we're still here.
Stress
moral of
testing
the
as a
story.
service.
Moral of the story: just don't do anything with Kat. Is what this comes down to. She's the common denominator of breaking things.
No. For an awesome time, get Kat involved. That's what brings it to the next level of cool.
Thank you all so much for being here today. Sean, do we have a tech tip?
We do have a tech tip for today. So this podcast is being recorded very close to the end of August. And I don't know if anyone's looked at their calendar lately, but if you look back at previous calendars, what happens usually in the beginning of September when we talk about Apple? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's about time for those betas to turn into production releases. So if you have not already, you need, as an organization today, to go to beta.apple.com/IT. You need to log in with your Apple Business Manager, your Apple School Manager account, and you need to download the latest build of the beta and get it on a non-production test machine right now. It may be pumpkin spice season coming soon, but it's definitely going to be Apple release season before that point. So test out your production stuff on your non-production test equipment at the new betas today.
And if things break, Tim and I did not do it.
I don't believe you. Well, Kat, that was a good one. Another podcast completed.
We did it. I really, again, I'm so glad our guests were here. I hope this was helpful and inspiring. I think before we wrap up, my final reminder, don't forget to register for JNUC. I think prices go up in September. So don't make your company pay more if you don't have to. And we would all love to see you there.
I'll be there too. Brain dates available. We can chat one-to-one or in a group of people. It'll be fun. Jamf After Dark is a podcast from Jamf and is copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Technical details and product offerings may change at any time, so always check jamf.com for the latest information on our products and services.
You can reach out to us if you have questions or comments or suggested show topics. And of course, we would love any fan mail. Simply send a friendly email to info@jamf.com with the subject line, attention to the podcast, for Tim or I to try to break things. And we're also a sponsor of the Mac Admins Foundation, and several Jamfs are available on the Mac Admins Slack. Of course, if you need tech support, don't wait. Visit support.jamf.com, open up a ticket, and get your technical questions answered.
And very special thanks to our guests this week, Mr. Jonathan Yuresko and Mr. Tim Knox. And a special thanks to our audio engineers, Merlin and Martin, the M&Ms, who help us sound so great. Until next time, for Kat Garbis, I'm Sean Rabbitt.
And for Sean Rabbitt, I'm Kat Garbis. We will catch you after dark again and live at JNUC.
Woo!
Good night,
Party.
good morning, good day, good afternoon. Thanks for listening.